How's it going, guys? Today we are finally talking about the Canon RF 15-35 f2.8 lens for the Canon EOS R ecosystem. I picked up this lens a few weeks ago now. It probably came in the mail about like 3-4 weeks ago, and I've been enjoying it so far. The way I'm going to structure this video is pretty much give you an intro, sort of why I ended up buying this lens, what are my first impressions when I opened the box. And then I'm going to talk about the scenarios that I've used the lens in, and then just talk about basic pros and cons about the lens and whether or who do I think this lens is for, and if I think you should buy it in 2022 and beyond. This isn't going to be a super detailed or technical review. This is just going to be my impressions and my review on real world use with this lens. This lens has been out for a while now, so if you're interested in looking at a more technical review, there's definitely some other videos out there. I'll leave some in the description that I think are really good. So when I first opened the box, in the box you pretty much get the basics. You get the lens, of course, you get a lens hood, a lens cap, you get a bag for the lens, little carrying pouch, and of course the manuals and stuff like that. But the first thing I noticed when I opened the box, and I noticed this honestly with all of the RF glass, especially in the native RF glass, is the build quality is really nice. The plastic that Canon has decided to use on their bodies and their lenses, I personally love. The rubber on the rings, the zoom ring and the focusing ring feels great. The audible little clicks on the third control ring is great. And even the switches, everything about this lens just feels expensive because it is a pretty expensive lens. And of course the weather seal is here as well. The next thing I noticed that I'll talk about a little bit more later in the video, but the barrel of the camera does expand when you zoom out. And personally, I don't like this design as much for this lens specifically. I know on the old 16-35, it was a internal barrel zoom, and I sort of like that form factor better. To go along with that is that there's no barrel lock feature or zoom lock feature like I have on the 24-105, which I'll go ahead and show you. Obviously, this guy zooms out a lot more than that lens. However, it does have a lock feature, which I kind of enjoy having in all of my lenses that, have an external like zoom barrel. So let me just talk briefly about sort of why I bought this lens and what I'm using this lens for. Really the main reason I bought this lens is kind of help with this YouTube channel. This is a great vlogging lens. Not that I vlog that often, but I did post a vlog, the video before this, which I do recommend you checking out, and you can kind of see how it functioned during the vlog. But this is a really good, wide angle lens with stabilization that I can use for vlogging. But it also helps me when I'm filming in my bedroom to kind of get different shots because there's only so much space that I have here. And then I also bought this lens for my landscape photography. I really didn't have the widest lens I had was a 24mm, and there's been so many times where I wanted to get like a wide landscape, and the 15mm is perfect for that. And then also for architecture photography and real estate photography, which I haven't been doing much of lately, but if I ever get back into it, this is the perfect lens to have for it. And those are the main uses I'm gonna have for this lens. So I really haven't taken this lens off of my camera over the past few weeks because I've just been trying to put it through its paces in different scenarios. And so far I've used it in street photography, urban landscape photography, just landscape photography, astrophotography, some portraits, and then just vlogging and some basic B-roll shots here and there. And overall, it's tackled all of them fairly well. This is such a versatile focal length, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but this lens so far has done really well in all of those scenarios. So I'm gonna move on and talk about the pros and cons about this lens. First, the pros, the things that really stand out to me is number one, at 2.8, and kind of across the entire aperture range, the lens is so sharp even in the corners. I feel like lenses have come a long way where even at 2.8, even wide open apertures, you can still get really sharp photos all the way to the edges. I'll probably show a couple of examples on the screen as I'm talking. And it's really surprised me. I've done several like urban landscape shots and architecture shots and street shots at 2.8. And the sharpness that's held throughout the entire image is awesome. And then even stopping down to f4, f8, f12, and as you keep getting higher and higher, it just continues to stay sharp. The other pro about this lens that I absolutely love is 15-35mm is such a versatile focal range. I am personally somebody who sees very well at more telephoto focal ranges, really 85mm. To me, 85mm is really natural to me when I'm shooting with it. So shooting with a 15mm lens, especially street photography, was a little bit of a challenge. But I quickly sort of discovered being able to use it at 15mm and then punch into 35mm, where then I can even crop a little bit. I do find this to be very versatile, not just in landscape photography, but even for street photography and portraits. You pretty much have you have a super wide angle lens for portraits if you want to get very like atmospheric portrait shots where you get a lot in frame. But I can also punch into 35mm, be at 2.8, be at a pretty high aperture, get a lot of depth of field, and make this pretty much a great portrait lens. It's not as good as my 35mm 1.8, which I'm filming with right now for portraits, but if this was on my camera and I was doing a portrait session and I just punch in really quick, I won't be disappointed with the results of that either. So I just think, I know that I can use this lens in almost any scenario, and it can be on my camera and I'll be able to do a decent job no matter what type of shoot that it is. Another thing I love about this lens is having the lens stabilization. Obviously the stabilization on the R cameras paired with the RF glass is just incredible, and this is another example of that, especially being wide at 15mm. I love stabilization on wide lenses, and I think this lens does a great job, especially because I'm going to be using this a lot for landscape shots, and sometimes I want to handhold my shots, even if they're wide shots, and because of the stabilization in the lens, it makes it possible for me to get, half a second exposures. I'll show some on the screen that I got. I think they were like half second exposures, and they were handheld, and it's all because of the stabilization system in the camera and the lens. Another thing I noticed about this lens, it does handle direct light fairly well. I'll show some examples on the screen so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, but I did shoot this at sunset, and sometimes what ends up happening is you kind of have the light from the sun or a really intense light source kind of washing out the rest of the highlights in the image. And this one handled it very well. It really just contained the sunbeams in a very specific spot of the image, and it didn't carry out. There weren't too many artifacts. And there's pretty much two cons that I want to talk about. The first one I kind of alluded to earlier, but the wobbles, and that's not really due to the lens, that's more due to the camera, but I'm going to talk about it anyways because since it is a 15mm lens, if you are using the in-body stabilization on the camera and the lens stabilization, what happens is that when the sensor is shifting and moving to stabilize the image, you get those really awkward wobbles that I'll put on the screen right now. And a lot of people do not like them. Personally, I don't necessarily care that much because they're really only noticeable when I'm walking around with the camera vlogging, and I never do that anyways. And even if I am doing that, the footage doesn't have to be perfect, if that makes sense. Obviously, if I'm trying to get really slow and steady handheld shots at 15mm, I'm going to be more careful, and I'll put on the screen an example of that. And you can't really notice the wobbles because I'm holding the camera and lens steady. But that is a con about kind of not just this lens, but shooting at a wide focal length on the Canon EOS R6. You do get those wobbles from time to time, and they're not the most attractive thing. Kind of the worst thing about this lens, and I don't know if it's necessarily the lens's fault or the camera's fault, but it's definitely accentuated being a 15mm lens, is when you are at 15mm, the autofocus doesn't always hit, especially in busy scenes. I've used this lens in my quote-unquote studio, and it has no problem keeping focus with my eye. However, if you're out in the street, even if you're taking portraits of a specific person, if there's a busy background or it's a little dark and they're not like, your subject isn't the first thing that the camera sees, at 15mm, this thing does struggle to autofocus at times. Specifically the eye autofocus or even face autofocus, head autofocus. It does miss quite a bit, I've noticed. And that's just due to being at 15mm, the image, obviously if your subject's very far away, it's gonna be harder for the camera to kind of pick it up. And then the last con, which honestly isn't a big deal at all, but it is just worth mentioning because it is a little bit annoying. I did mention earlier that the barrel, when you zoom out, it does, extend externally, but it's actually funny because it's actually reversed. So when you're at 15mm, which is normally where I would want to store this lens, because normally when I store my lenses, I like to store them at their widest, possibility. Like a 24-70, I will store at 24, and then if I want to use 70, when I put on my camera, I'll zoom in out to 70. On this lens at 15 millimeters, that's when the barrel sticks out. And then when you zoom out to 35 millimeters, that's when the barrel of the lens is in. I don't understand why. I'm not a lens maker. I don't understand how the glass shifts and, you know, the zoom works and all of that. But it's kind of annoying. I would rather have this on my camera in my bag at 15 millimeters, take it out of my bag, turn it on, and I'm at my widest frame. And then when I go to frame up my shot, then if I want to zoom out to 35 millimeters, I would expect the barrel to extend, but instead it you know, comes back into the lens body. And I sort of don't understand it. Super minor gripe with this lens, but I wish it was reversed. My 24-105, which I use this lens quite a bit, 24 millimeters, the widest it can go. It's at its smallest form factor. And then when I extend out to 105, the barrel of the lens extends. And that's how most lenses I've used are this way. So, you know, super minor thing. Don't know why it's like that, but it is what it is. And I think that's going to do it for my cons. There's not really any, you know, glaring issues with this lens. The lens is great. In my opinion, you get what you pay for. It is a little pricey, but you really do get what you pay for with these Canon RF lenses. And overall, there's definitely way more pros than there are cons. Just some minor things here and there that I noticed, but overall, I really do like this lens a lot. So finally, who do I think this lens is for? Pretty much, I think if you're in need of getting a wide-angled lens for your Canon R6 or R5 or R3, then I think you're pretty much set going with this lens. I think you get a really good focal range of 15 to 35 millimeters. It's based off of one of the best Canon lenses, in my opinion, the 16 to 35 millimeter EF lens. And it just takes that lens and improves on it, in my opinion. So if you're somebody who shoots real estate, if you're somebody who shoots landscapes, if you're someone who shoots urban landscapes, or you vlog, or you need a wide video lens for whatever reason, in my opinion, this is the one you go with. It has really good stabilization. It's 2.8 throughout the entire focal range. The build quality is great. It's weather sealed. There's really no downside to getting this lens. It is expensive, but it's definitely worth it if you need a wide lens. There's other options, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any other third-party lens that I would buy. I know Samyang makes a like 12 millimeter or 14 millimeter prime lens. That might be a great option if you're doing astrophotography and astrophotography only. But even then, I would prefer having something a little bit more versatile in my bag. And this one is definitely very, very versatile. And that is going to conclude the review. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was beneficial and concise. And I hope I got my information across well. If you are thinking about buying this lens and you have any other questions or concerns, leave them down in the comments and let me know. I will be sure to get back to you and answer all the questions. And that is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Follow me on Instagram. I'll put it on the screen right now and I'll leave the link in the description. Check out my website. I just built a new website. So if you want to go check out a little bit of my portfolio, I'm going to leave my website linked in the description as well. And I will see you guys in the next video. Please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'm growing this channel. I'm past 300 subs, which is awesome. I think I'm around like 310 right now, which is great. So let's continue to keep climbing, get towards that 1,000 mark. So thank you guys. Peace out and have a great day.